I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We are continuing with our reading in the Gospels. Christ has come up to Galilee, fleeing from Jerusalem where the Jews are seeking to kill him. He has declared his messiahship in Nazareth, his hometown. They have rejected him and again attempted to kill him. So he has left there and gone to Capernaum, another town of Galilee. That's where we left it. We are now going to read a portion in Mark, and then Matthew, and then Luke. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now, what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. Now, you'll recall that shortly after Christ was baptized down in Bethabara, he met Simon, who he called Cephas or Peter, and his brother Andrew, and Philip, and Nathaniel, and a few others. And they listened to him. They became his disciples, and they went with him back up into Galilee. And that was before he went down to the Passover in Jerusalem. They did not go to Jerusalem with him, or if they did, they had been back in Galilee, back plying their trade as fishermen. So remember that as we pick this up. First, Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20. Now as he walked by the sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And Jesus said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. And straightway they forsook their nets, and followed him. And when he had gone a little further thence, he saw James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, who also were in the ship, mending their nets. And straightway he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the ship with his hired servants, and went after him. This is Christ calling the 12 to the ministry. Before he taught them, he conversed with them, he hung out at home with them. But now they are being called to the ministry. Christ has been out preaching to some extent, but now he is getting serious in his ministry. And he is calling his 12 apostles. Right here there's only the 4 being directly called. Simon and Andrew and Peter and John and James. Now some people will tell you that these guys were poor fishermen that were just eking out a small living, but that's not true. You can see that by the fact that Zebedee had hired servants. These men, they weren't just leaving their father in the lurch as a poor fisherman to do the work by himself. No, they had servants. They ran a fishing business. They were at least comfortable in their lifestyle. They were not poor paupers. So let us look at the Joseph Smith translation from Mark. There's not much here. Verse 16, when we start off, just a minor, where the King James says, Now as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, Joseph Smith adds, and now as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, minor change. In verse 20, it says in the King James, And straightway he called them. But in the Joseph Smith, he says, And he called them, and straightway they left their father Zebedee. So a slight difference there, where in the King James it is that Christ is being immediate in his calling. He sees them and instantly he calls them. But no, we change it to he calls them and immediately or straightway they leave their nets and follow him. So a subtle minor change there that doesn't really give us any great insight, but it does improve the grammar. So now we move to Matthew. And we're going to read in Matthew chapter 4, verses 17 through 22. From that time Jesus began to preach and to say, Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw 2 brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence he saw other 2 brethren, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and they immediately left the ship and their father, and followed him. So the only difference here is we have that opening where it says that Christ is beginning to preach. Christ is preaching more and more, and now he is calling his 12. So very little difference there. The only wording difference that I can see is that instead of using the term straightway, he uses the term immediately, which basically means the same thing. So let us look at the Joseph Smith translation here. In verse 19, the King James says, And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Joseph Smith has a little addition here. And he said unto them, I am he of whom it is written by the prophets, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. So he is declaring to them, again, his messiahship. He is saying, I am the promised Messiah. I am the Son of God, as prophesied of. And then he calls them to follow him. So he's not just saying, hey, come follow me. He is establishing why they should be following him. Now, we actually have 20 through 22 all have some changes. So in verse 20, King James, and they straightway left their nets and followed him, in the Joseph Smith translation. And they, believing on his words, left their net and straightway followed him. In verse 21, I find it kind of funny here. It's in the King James, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, and then later mending their nets. Joseph Smith takes off the S there. It's no longer plural, nets, but net. But he also has James and John his brother, the sons of Zebedee. Because the way it is before, it almost sounds like John is the brother of Zebedee, not the brother of James. In verse 22, it says, and they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. In the Joseph Smith translation, it says, and they immediately left their father in the ship, which is how Mark put it. There is that one difference I didn't notice at first, but Mark mentions the servants in the ship with their father. Matthew doesn't. That's an interesting difference. Let us turn to Luke, and Luke has the longest account of this event. This is in Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and saw two ships standing by the lake. But the fishermen were gone out of them, and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering said unto him, Master, we have toiled all the night, and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word I will let down the net. And when they had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which were taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought the ships to land, they forsook all, and followed him. Now this is an interesting one. In Matthew and Mark, we have this account. Jesus is just there, he's by the seashore, he sees them, says, hey, come follow me. Now Matthew does say, I'm the Christ, come follow me. But in this one, he's teaching the people. And the people get crowded around him, and so he says, Simon, cast out a little bit so I can get a little ways from the crowd and I can teach him from the ship, which he does. And then we have this miracle, cast out your net, and they draw in all the fish. And Peter immediately recognizes him as the Christ. He understands he is the Christ. No question there. And I love that Peter says, I'm too sinful to be in your presence, you should leave. But then he calls her and says, well, you will now be a catcher of men. And as soon as they get everything to shore, they leave. One other thing very important to note here is that Andrew and Peter and James and John were partners. They weren't doing their own thing. They were working together. They had a fishing company. This was a business for them. This is their livelihood. And they all worked together. Now I find this interesting, very significant that Christ performed this particular miracle, almost as a sign to these men that it was time for them to come and join the ministry. Because after his resurrection, he will perform a similar miracle. Let us look at the Joseph Smith translation. In verse 1, just a minor update. He removes the word that. So, and it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him, and it came to pass as the people pressed upon him, minor update. Verse 2, saw two ships standing by the lake, and they're washing their nets. Now, in the Joseph Smith translation, they're standing on the lake, which makes a lot more sense. They didn't drag the boats up onto shore. And they are wetting their nets. So they're getting them ready to be used again. In verse 4, when he had left speaking, changed to when he had done speaking. So again, minor grammatical update. Verse 6, we have more when they had this done, corrected to when they had done this. Verse 7, and they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, and they changed, and they beckoned unto partners who were in the other ship. So they weren't the only partners, I guess. Maybe they had a larger company. In verse 8, when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees. Just to clarify, when Peter saw the multitude of fishes. Again, just some minor grammatical updates in the next few verses. That's it, just more minor grammatical updates. So that is where we will leave it, and we will see what happens next. So I will see you in the next one.